Imagine a live television moment so explosive, it silenced one of the most feared media giants in America. Rachel Maddow, the queen of liberal cable news, thought she was about to deliver another trademark takedown. But instead, she was blindsided on her own show, left speechless in front of millions, as a freshman congresswoman flipped the script in a way nobody saw coming. This wasn't just an interview, it was a public dismantling, a courtroom-style cross-examination that exposed not only Maddow's arguments but her entire brand. What followed was a fiery exchange that spread across the internet at lightning speed, racking up millions of views in hours, dominating headlines, and igniting a political firestorm. Experts are already calling it one of the most devastating clapbacks in modern media history. And trust me, you have never seen Rachel Maddow like this before. By the end of this video, you'll understand why people are saying this single interview could change progressive politics forever. So smash that like button, subscribe to the channel so you never miss stories this shocking, and tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. We love to know how far our community reaches. What began as an ordinary primetime interview turned into one of the most unforgettable television moments of the decade, a clash so raw, so unfiltered, that even the most seasoned political commentators were left reeling. On one side of the table sat Rachel Maddow, the powerhouse of progressive cable television, known for her sharp intellect, unrelenting style, and reputation as the liberal establishment's iron wall. On the other side was Jasmine Crockett, a 43-year-old congresswoman from Texas, a freshman lawmaker with courtroom instincts, a growing national profile, and a fire that could ignite even the coldest debate. Nobody in that studio knew it yet, but the next 8 minutes would shatter reputations, shift narratives, and create a viral moment that spread across America faster than any headline in 2025. The studio lights were blazing, the air charged with anticipation, and producers whispered behind the cameras with that confident grin they wore whenever they expected fireworks that would fuel ratings. To them, this was supposed to be another Maddow takedown, another night where the queen of progressive television proved she could handle any guest and bend the narrative to her advantage. She had the research ready, stacks of documents at her side, her signature glasses reflecting the glare, and decades of experience in skewering guests who dared to challenge her authority. But across the table, Jasmine Crockett sat with the posture of a trial lawyer who knew she had the winning evidence in her briefcase. Calm, unshaken, ready. Observers at home would later say they noticed it right away. An energy that didn't feel defensive, an aura that screamed she wasn't here to play along with television theatrics. She was here to fight, and that should have been the first warning that this interview wouldn't go as planned. To understand why this clash hit like a political earthquake, you need to know the forces colliding in that studio. Rachel Maddow, at 52, had long built her empire as MSNBC's top draw. Her nightly show attracted millions, her sharp suits and piercing analysis giving her the aura of a scholar warrior for liberal America. For years, she had exposed scandals, dissected corruption, and cemented her place as the voice progressives trusted. With an annual salary rumored to hover near $7 million, she wasn't just a journalist, she was an institution. Politicians feared her questioning, staffers dreaded the infamous document dump, and viewers treated her broadcasts as gospel. She was more than a reporter, she was a kingmaker. But institutions, no matter how powerful, always meet challengers. And Jasmine Crockett wasn't the kind of guest who cowered in the face of big media reputations. Born and raised in Texas, trained as a civil rights attorney at the University of Houston, Crockett had spent years on the front lines of real battles. Not television debates, but courtrooms where lives and livelihoods were on the line. She had sued corporations that preyed on working families, defended voting rights in hostile environments, and gone toe-to-toe with institutions that thought they were untouchable. She wasn't just another polished politician with carefully tested soundbites. She was a fighter, molded by real stakes and real people's struggles. By the time she entered Congress, her following had exploded, her social media speeches drawing millions of views, her authenticity resonating with voters sick of establishment talking points. If Maddow represented the polished authority of liberal media, Crockett embodied the raw energy of a new progressive generation, and that night, the two collided head-on. The interview was supposed to be about Democratic unity ahead of the 2026 midterms. Maddow had spent weeks framing progressives as reckless, suggesting their push for policies like Medicare for all, student debt cancellation, and the Green New Deal risked alienating moderate voters. To her, the message was clear: progressives were overreaching, and if Democrats wanted to win, they needed to tone it down. This night was meant to be the capstone, a moment to corner Crockett into admitting that progressives had gone too far. But Crockett had other plans. The first question was classic Maddow, sharp, loaded, and designed to put her guest on the defensive. Congresswoman, polling suggests progressive policies like Medicare for all or defunding the police actually push moderates toward Republicans. Don't you worry that this kind of messaging hurts your party's chances? It was the type of setup that had humbled senators and governors before. But Crockett didn't flinch. She smiled, leaned in slightly, and with the calm precision of a trial lawyer, dismantled the very premise of the question. Rachel, before we talk about polling, shouldn't we talk about results? Because the numbers I'm looking at tell a very different story. The audience at home leaned closer. This wasn't the nervous backpedaling most politicians offered. This was a challenge. The energy shifted immediately. Maddow, visibly irritated, pressed harder. She pointed to recent state elections, to suburban voters, to narratives her team had built for weeks. Don't you think it's irresponsible, she asked, to push policies that polling shows are unpopular with the voters Democrats need to win? And that word, irresponsible, was the spark that lit the fire. Crockett's eyes sharpened, her voice steadied with steel. Irresponsible? Rachel, let me ask you this. When was the last time you had to choose between paying rent and paying for insulin? Because the families I represent make those choices every day. And you're telling me that fighting for their survival is irresponsible? The silence in the studio was deafening. For the first time, the interviewer looked like the one on trial. From that moment, Crockett went on the offensive, flipping every one of Maddow's strategies back on her. When Maddow tried to pivot to strategy, Crockett pulled it back to human suffering. When Maddow cited polls, Crockett cited lived experience. And when Maddow implied progressives were dangerous to the party, Crockett made it clear the real danger was ignoring the struggles of working families. With every answer, Crockett exposed not just Maddow's arguments but the entire framework of establishment media. She wasn't playing by the rules, and the internet would soon reward her for it. The climax came when Crockett, voice steady but blazing with conviction, looked Maddow dead in the eye and said, "Rachel, what's truly irresponsible is a television host making millions telling families who can't afford health care that their demands are too radical. What's irresponsible is forgetting that this fight isn't about suburban polling data. It's about whether people live or die." And then, in the moment that would be clipped, shared and remixed a million times, she added, "Maybe the problem isn't my message. Maybe the problem is that you've forgotten what this fight is really about." Maddow froze. Her face drained of color. The woman who had torn through presidents and CEOs suddenly had no words. Cameras caught it all. The slight gape of her mouth, the nervous shuffle of her papers, the unmistakable loss of control. For the first time in her career, Rachel Maddow was speechless. The interview collapsed after that. Crockett, in full command, delivered one final strike, stood up, and walked off the set. Maddow remained at her desk, stunned, silent, her producers scrambling as the cameras rolled. What was meant to be a 20-minute segment ended in 8, but those 8 minutes would ripple through politics for months. The internet detonated within minutes. A 15-second clip of Crockett's final line, "Maybe the problem is that you've forgotten what this fight is about," hit Twitter before the studio lights had even cooled. Within an hour, it had 500,000 views. By midnight, 2 million. By the next day, over 10 million. Hashtags like Crockett clapback and Maddow speechless trended nationwide. TikTok flooded with reenactments of Maddow's shocked expressions, remix edits with dramatic music and memes labeling the moment as the Crockett effect. Young voters especially seized on it, treating it not just as entertainment, but as a symbol of defiance against establishment voices. Even conservatives, who disagreed with Crockett's politics, admitted respect for the way she had stood her ground. "You don't have to agree with her to admit she had guts," one pundit remarked. But the impact wasn't just cultural, it was political. Crockett's campaign donations skyrocketed. In just 48 hours, she raised more money than she had in the past 3 months combined, with thousands of small-dollar donors citing the Maddow interview as their reason. Progressive organizations rallied around her, calling it proof that politicians could fight both the right and the establishment media. Communication strategists began dissecting her performance as a case study in how to handle hostile interviews, reject false premises, redirect to lived reality, and never cede moral ground. Meanwhile, Rachel Maddow's silence spoke volumes. For 24 hours, she said nothing, her social media accounts unusually quiet. When she finally addressed the controversy, calling the exchange a robust discussion, the attempt at damage control fell flat. Viewers didn't see a robust discussion. They saw an 8-minute dismantling, and the narrative had already escaped her control. For many, Maddow wasn't the queen of progressive television anymore. She was the symbol of what happens when media elites lose touch with the people they claim to champion. In the weeks that followed, the so-called Crockett effect reshaped progressive politics. Young lawmakers began pushing back harder in interviews, refusing to bend to establishment framing. Activist groups encouraged candidates to bypass cable shows altogether, turning instead to social media platforms where they could speak directly to voters. Pulling a Crockett became shorthand for refusing to bow under media pressure. Even political science professors began teaching the interview as a modern example of how power dynamics between politicians and the press were shifting. But beyond the memes and the viral moments, the confrontation revealed something deeper, a hunger for authenticity. Voters, especially younger ones, were tired of carefully packaged messages designed for cable news soundbites. They wanted conviction, courage, and unfiltered truth. Crockett gave them that in 8 unforgettable minutes, and the reaction proved just how starved people were for it. The interview wasn't just a battle between 2 women, it was a battle between 2 eras. The old guard of polished media authority versus the new wave of unapologetic political fighters. And on that night, the new wave won. Months later, the shockwaves still hadn't faded. Crockett's lines continued to circulate online, quoted in speeches, printed on protest signs, referenced in campaign ads. Maddow, once untouchable, now carried the aura of someone whose armor had been pierced, and progressive politics as a whole had shifted. The fight was no longer just about defeating conservatives. It was about refusing to let establishment media dictate what counted as acceptable progress. The Crockett moment will be remembered not just as entertainment, not just as a viral clip, but as a turning point. A reminder that sometimes the most important political battles don't happen in Congress or on campaign trails. They happen in studios where the stories are shaped. And sometimes all it takes is one unflinching voice to remind millions what the fight is really about. So if you ever wonder what political courage looks like in the age of viral media, remember that night. Remember the blazing lights, the stunned silence, the clip that broke the internet. Remember Jasmine Crockett standing tall, refusing to bend, and walking off with the final word. Because that was more than an interview. It was a declaration, a signal that a new generation isn't waiting for permission, and they're not afraid to speak truth to power, even when that power is sitting across the table in a pair of signature glasses, expecting to win.